A man can tell the truth by the way another man rides, old ranchers like to say out in Arizona territory. But nobody in Dust Hollow had ever seen a woman ride the way Aiyana Red Hawk did. The wind carried dust through the main street as more than 30 cowboys crowded outside Cole Mercer's stable, each one hoping to win the same thing. Half a ranch. A steady paycheck. A future worth waking up to. Cole stood on the porch above them, broad shoulders framed by the fading afternoon sun, one hand resting on the rail worn smooth by years of weather and hard decisions. "Dead Man Ridge," he said, his voice carrying over the restless horses below. 200 wild mustangs. 20 miles of canyon trails. Whoever gets that herd across alive earns partnership on my land. Low whistles spread through the crowd. Men shifted in their boots. Every rider in 3 counties knew Dead Man Ridge. Narrow passes. Loose stone. Sudden storms that rolled through without warning. A place where horses panicked easy and proud men came back quiet. "You're asking for a funeral, Mercer," one cowboy muttered, spitting tobacco into the dirt. Cole ignored him. His gray horse stomped beside the hitching rail, nervous from the smell of too many strangers and too much heat. "I'm asking for someone who can ride," Cole replied. The crowd laughed at that. Most thought the challenge was impossible. The others were too proud to admit they were afraid. Then the sound came. Hoofbeats. Slow. Steady. Different from the restless shifting of town horses. Every head turned toward the edge of the street where a black mare emerged through the dust like something carved out of shadow and desert smoke. The rider sat tall in the saddle, back straight, dark braid moving lightly against a faded buckskin jacket. Apache beadwork lined the sleeves. Hawk feathers hung near the horse's reins, swaying softly with each step. The mare never rushed. Never startled. Even with 30 unfamiliar horses nearby, she moved calm as river water. The cowboys stopped laughing. Aiyana Red Hawk pulled the horse to a halt near the stable porch and looked up at Cole Mercer without a word. Her eyes were dark, steady, impossible to read. Not challenging. Not fearful either. Just watching him the way an eagle watches open land. One cowboy near the water trough smirked under his breath. Mercer said he wanted riders, he called out. Not entertainment. A few men chuckled. Aiyana never even looked his way. Instead, she slid off the saddle in one smooth motion and placed her hand lightly against the mare's neck. The horse lowered its head instantly. Cole noticed that. Men spent years trying to earn trust from animals like that. She'd done it without effort. "Name?" Cole asked. "Aiyana Red Hawk." Her voice was low and calm, carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had crossed dangerous country alone and survived it. Cole nodded once. "You here to watch?" Finally, the faintest shift touched her expression. Not quite amusement. Not quite insult. "No," she said softly. "I'm here to win." The street went silent again. Somewhere behind the stable, a loose gate slammed in the wind. One of the younger riders laughed too loudly, trying to break the tension pressing down over the town. "Lady," he said, "Dead Man Ridge breaks men twice your size." Aiyana turned her eyes toward him at last. Cold desert wind moved through the street between them. "Then maybe," she said quietly, "it's time the ridge met someone different." The silence did not last long in Dust Hollow. Towns like that survived on gossip the same way dry ground survived on rain. By the time the sun slipped lower behind the canyon cliffs, every stable hand, ranch wife, and whiskey drinker within 5 miles had heard about the Apache woman standing in Cole Mercer's yard talking like she already owned the place. Some laughed about it. Others did not. Cole watched from the stable fence as riders prepared for the next morning's journey. Saddles creaked. Spurs clicked softly against wood. Horses breathed clouds of dust into the cooling evening air. Across the yard, Aiyana sat beside her black mare with quiet patience, repairing a worn leather strap with careful fingers. She stayed apart from the others. Not nervous. Just distant. Like someone used to surviving alone. A young cowboy named Travis stepped beside Cole and lowered his voice. "You. Really letting her ride tomorrow?" Cole kept his eyes on the yard. "She signed the ledger same as everyone else." Travis shook his head slowly. "Men are already angry. They do not want an Apache woman leading them through ridge country." Cole finally looked at him. "Then maybe they should ride better." Travis laughed once under his breath, though there was little humor in it. Across the yard, another rider was less careful with his opinions. Wade Burnett leaned against the water trough with two friends beside him, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I give her 3 miles before that horse throws her into a cactus patch." A few men chuckled. Wade pushed off the trough and walked toward Aiyana with the swagger of somebody too comfortable hearing his own voice. "You planning on keeping up tomorrow?" he asked her. No answer. She kept working on the leather strap. Wade smirked. "Or maybe Mercer hired you to pray for rain." A couple riders laughed harder this time. Aiyana tied off the repaired strap and rose slowly to her feet. Dust moved around her boots as the evening wind picked up. She was not tall for a woman, but something about the stillness in her posture made the men nearby quiet down without understanding why. Wade pointed toward the large holding pen near the edge of the yard. Inside, a massive gray Mustang slammed against the wooden rails, wild-eyed and furious from 3 straight days of failed handling. "Tell you what," Wade said. "Ride old Brutus across the yard, and maybe I will believe those stories about Apache riders." The crowd stirred. Even experienced ranch hands avoided that horse. Old Brutus had thrown every man who climbed near him since spring. Cole straightened from the fence, ready to step in before the situation turned uglier, but Aiyana had already started walking toward the pen. Calm. Unhurried. Wade's grin faded a little. "You do not have to prove anything," Cole called out. Aiyana stopped beside the gate without looking back at him. "No," she said softly. "But men like him usually need reminding." She stepped inside the pen. The Mustang instantly jerked its head toward her, muscles tight beneath its silver coat. The horse pawed the dirt once, breathing hard enough for everyone outside the rails to hear. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Aiyana did not reach for rope or reins. She only stood there beneath the fading Arizona sky while the wind tugged gently at the feathers braided into her dark hair. Then she made a low sound in her throat. Soft. Almost like a song carried through canyon stone. The Mustang froze. Wade frowned. The horse's ears turned forward. Another quiet sound left Aiyana's lips, and slowly, unbelievably, the giant gray animal lowered its head toward her hand. The entire yard went still. Cole felt something shift deep in his chest as he watched her rest one hand against the horse's neck like they had known each other for years. Then Aiyana lifted her eyes toward Wade Burnett standing speechless near the trough. "Tomorrow," she said quietly, "try to keep up." By sunrise, the story had already spread beyond Dust Hollow. Riders arriving from nearby ranches slowed their horses near Cole Mercer's stable just to stare at the Apache woman who had calmed old Brutus like he was born gentle. Nobody understood it, and men fear the things they cannot understand. The morning air carried the smell of leather, coffee, and cold desert wind rolling down from the ridge country. Horses stamped against the frozen ground while stable boys hurried between saddles and supply crates. The long drive to Dead Man Ridge would begin within the hour. Cole stood near the main corral checking rifle straps and water skins, though his attention kept drifting toward the far side of the yard where Aiyana tightened the saddle on her black mare. She moved with quiet precision. Every buckle checked twice. Every strap pulled firm with steady hands. No wasted motion. No nervousness. Like somebody preparing for weather she had already survived before. Wade Burnett watched her from beside the feed wagon, still embarrassed from the night before. That horse was tired, he muttered to another rider. Anybody could have calmed him. The older cowboy beside him shook his head slowly. No, he replied. Not like that. Cole heard it all but said nothing. He had spent most of his life around riders. Good ones talked less and watched more. Aiyana had barely spoken 10 words since arriving, yet somehow the entire yard shifted whenever she moved through it. Men stopped joking around her. Even the horses paid attention. A stable hand approached Cole carrying the contest ledger. Need final signatures before departure. Cole nodded and opened the book across a rain barrel. One by one, the riders stepped forward and signed their names. Travis Reed. Wade Burnett. Samuel Pike. Dust swirled through the yard as the line slowly shortened. Then Aiyana stepped forward last. Cole handed her the pen. Her fingers brushed the handle lightly before she paused. For a moment, the yard grew strangely quiet again. She did not write immediately. Instead, she looked down at the empty line as though measuring something invisible. Wade smirked nearby. What is wrong? He called out. Apache women do not write. Cole shot him a hard glance, but Aiyana remained calm. Slowly, she lowered the pen and drew a single symbol onto the page instead. A hawk with wide wings rising above the canyon line. Clean. Precise. Beautiful in a way nobody expected. Travis leaned closer to look at it. That your mark? Aiyana nodded once. My grandfather taught me. Cole stared at the drawing longer than he meant to. You do not use your family name, he asked quietly. A faint breeze moved loose strands of dark hair across her face. The army buried most of my family names years ago. The words landed softly, but they carried enough weight to still the entire yard. Nobody laughed after that. Somewhere beyond town, thunder rolled low across the distant cliffs even though the sky above Dust Hollow remained clear. Cole closed the ledger slowly. We ride in 10 minutes, he announced. Men scattered toward their horses. Leather creaked. Spurs jingled softly against stirrups. But before Aiyana turned away, Cole spoke again, lower this time so only she could hear. Dead Man Ridge is worse than people say. Aiyana rested one hand against her mare's neck and looked toward the dark line of mountains waiting far beyond the town. Good, she said quietly. Easy roads teach people nothing. Then she climbed into the saddle in one smooth motion. Just as another deep roll of thunder echoed across the desert, and for the first time in years, Cole Mercer felt uncertain about who would survive the trail ahead and who would not. The riders left Dust Hollow beneath a sky the color of old iron. Morning light spilled slowly across the desert floor while 200 restless mustangs pushed dust clouds into the cold air ahead of the trail. The sound alone felt alive. Hooves striking stone. Saddle leather groaning. Wind slipping through dry canyon brush. Cole Mercer rode near the front beside Travis Reed, eyes fixed on the narrow stretch of ridge country waiting miles ahead. Nobody spoke much anymore. The closer they came to Dead Man Ridge, the quieter the men became. Even Wade Burnett had stopped making jokes. Fear has a way of drying up loud mouths. Aiyana rode near the outer edge of the herd on her black mare, moving like she belonged to the desert itself. She barely touched the reins. Sometimes she guided the horse with nothing more than a shift in posture or a low whistle carried away by the wind. Cole noticed the mustangs reacting to her long before the others did. Nervous horses settled when she passed near them. The wilder stallions stopped challenging each other. It made no sense, but the herd trusted her. Around noon, the trail narrowed into broken canyon stone where steep walls rose nearly 40 feet on either side. Shadows cooled the air beneath the cliffs, though heat still shimmered higher above the ridge line. Travis wiped dust from his face. I do not like this stretch, he muttered. Too quiet. Cole nodded slowly. Dead Man Ridge earned its name from weather, not outlaws. Wind changed fast through these canyons. Loose rocks slid without warning. Horses panicked easy in tight spaces. One mistake could send 200 animals running blind. Ahead of the herd, a sharp crack echoed somewhere high above the cliffs. Several mustangs jerked their heads upward instantly. Another sound followed. Thunder. Closer this time. Cole looked toward the western sky and felt his stomach tighten. Dark clouds were rolling over the mountains far too quickly. Storm is moving fast, Travis said. Too fast, Cole answered. Wind suddenly rushed through the canyon hard enough to rattle saddle straps and kick dirt against the horses' legs. The mustangs grew restless all at once, ears flattening, muscles tightening beneath dusty coats. One young stallion screamed sharply and bolted sideways into the herd. Instantly the movement spread like fire through dry grass. Horses shoved against each other. Riders pulled reins hard. Men shouted over rising thunder. The canyon walls trapped every sound until panic seemed to shake the stone itself. Hold the line. Cole yelled, forcing his gray horse forward. But the herd was slipping apart too fast. Then another crack of thunder exploded overhead, and half the mustangs surged toward the narrow canyon bend ahead. Travis cursed under his breath. If they run blind through that turn, we lose the whole herd. Cole saw it too. Loose rock waited beyond the bend beside a steep drop into broken ravine country. One stampede there could scatter horses for 50 miles. Riders fought to regain control, but fear had already taken the herd. Except for one horse. The black mare moved calmly through the chaos while Aiyana rode straight toward the front of the panicking mustangs. Dust whipped around her like smoke. Wind tore loose strands of dark hair across her face, but her posture never changed. Cole watched her rise slightly in the stirrups and place 2 fingers between her lips. A sharp whistle sliced through the storm air. Strange. High. Almost bird-like. The lead stallion froze mid-stride. Another whistle followed. Then another. One by one, the horses began slowing. Not perfectly. Not completely. But enough. The panic broke just enough for the riders to regain control. Cole stared in disbelief as Aiyana guided the herd away from the canyon edge using nothing but whistles and calm pressure from her mare. Even the thunder seemed quieter after that. Wade Burnett pulled alongside Cole, pale beneath the dust covering his face. "Where in God's name did she learn that?" he whispered. Cole kept his eyes on the woman riding ahead of the herd toward the dark mouth of Dead Man Ridge. "I think," he said slowly, "we are the ones about to learn something." By late evening, the storm had moved east, leaving Dead Man Ridge wrapped in cold silence and the sharp smell of wet stone. The riders made camp beneath a narrow stretch of canyon wall where twisted cedar trees bent against the wind like tired old men. Small fires flickered across the dark while horses rested nearby, their sides still damp from the hard ride through the storm. Nobody spoke loudly anymore. Something about the ridge demanded quiet. Cole Mercer sat near the edge of the firelight sharpening a hunting knife against a flat stone when he noticed Aiyana alone near the outer camp. She had removed the saddle from her mare and was carefully brushing rain dust from the horse's black coat with slow, patient strokes. Most riders took care of horses because they needed them. She cared for hers like family. Cole watched for a moment before standing and carrying over a small tin cup of coffee. The fire behind him cracked softly as he approached. "You handled that herd better than half the men I have hired," he said. Aiyana accepted the coffee with a small nod but did not smile. "The horses were afraid," she replied quietly. "Fear spreads faster than fire." Cole leaned against a cedar trunk beside her. Most riders would have fought them harder. A faint breeze moved through camp, carrying the distant howl of desert wind across the cliffs. "That is why most riders lose horses," she said. For a while, neither spoke again. The silence between them felt strange. Not uncomfortable. Just heavy with things both understood without saying aloud. Cole noticed scars running across the mare's front legs. Old marks. Faded white beneath black fur. She survived a bad fall, he asked. Aiyana rested her hand gently against the horse's neck. Army scouts chased us through canyon country 3 winters ago. Cole looked up slowly. Us? Her eyes stayed on the horse. My younger brother was sick. Fever. We were trying to reach a healer before the snow closed the mountain passes. Firelight flickered softly across her face, but her voice never changed. Calm. Controlled. Like someone telling a story too old to cry over anymore. One rider fired near the cliffs to scare the horses. My mare slipped crossing ice. Cole glanced again at the scars. You stayed with her. Aiyana finally looked at him then. She stayed with me first. The word settled into the cold night air between them. Nearby, laughter rose briefly from Wade Burnett's fire before fading back into the canyon dark. Cole studied Aiyana carefully now. Most people carried anger loudly. Hers sat deep and quiet like buried stone. You do not trust men like me much, he said. A faint shadow crossed her expression. Men like you built towns beside our rivers and called them empty. Cole could not argue with that. He stared into the darkness beyond camp where the cliffs disappeared into moonlight. Not all of us agreed with it. No, she answered softly. But most stayed silent. Somewhere above the canyon, an owl called once through the night. The sound echoed low and lonely across the ridge. Cole rubbed tired dust from his hands. My father used to say silence keeps a man alive. Aiyana lowered her eyes toward the firelight trembling across the coffee in her cup. Maybe, she said. But silence also buries people. Cole felt that one deeper than he expected. The strange thing was she had not raised her voice once all evening, yet somehow every word felt sharper than an argument. Before he could answer, Travis Reed hurried into camp from the outer trail, breathing hard from the climb. Mercer, he called. You need to see this. Every rider near the fires looked up instantly. Travis stopped beside them and pointed toward the northern cliffs above camp where fresh horse tracks cut through the wet canyon mud. Too many tracks for wild horses. Cole's jaw tightened. How many? Travis swallowed once before answering. Enough to follow us through the ridge. Aiyana slowly set down the untouched coffee beside the fire and lifted her eyes toward the dark canyon beyond camp. Then, she said quietly, we are no longer alone out here. The canyon felt different after midnight. Colder. Tighter somehow. Wind moved through the rocks with a low sound that almost resembled whispering, and every horse in camp sensed it. Some shifted nervously against their reins. Others stared into the darkness beyond. The firelight like they could see something the riders could not. Cole Mercer had not slept more than an hour when the sound reached him. Soft at first. Stone sliding against stone somewhere high above camp. His eyes opened instantly. Across the dying fire, Aiyana was already awake. Sitting still beside her saddle blanket with one hand resting lightly on the handle of her knife. Not frightened. Listening. Cole rose quietly to his feet. You heard it too. Aiyana nodded once toward the canyon wall above them. Someone is moving carefully. Nearby, Travis Reed stirred awake, rubbing sleep from his eyes. What is happening? Before Cole could answer, another sound echoed through the darkness. A horse snorting sharply near the northern edge of camp. Then sudden movement. One of the tether lines snapped loose, sending 3 mustangs bolting through the shadows beyond the cedar trees. Men jolted awake all at once. Boots hit dirt. Horses screamed nervously. Get the herd under control. Cole shouted. Riders rushed through camp grabbing reins and lanterns while wind whipped sparks from the dying fires into the cold air. Wade Burnett climbed into the saddle beside the supply wagon, cursing under his breath. "Somebody cut the rope," he barked. Cole felt his jaw tighten instantly. Mustangs did not break free like that by accident. Aiyana moved toward the edge of camp faster than anyone else, her black mare already saddled before most men had even found their boots. She crouched near the broken tether line and touched the frayed rope with careful fingers. "Knife cut," she said quietly. Travis looked toward the canyon dark. "You think the riders following us did this?" Aiyana slowly stood. No, her eyes shifted toward the camp itself. "I think somebody already inside camp did." Silence hit harder than the wind. Several men exchanged uneasy looks near the horses. Nobody liked hearing suspicion spoken out loud on a trail this dangerous. Cole stepped forward. "You accusing one of my riders?" Aiyana met his stare calmly. "I am saying fear makes men foolish." Before Cole could respond, another crash echoed from deeper in the canyon. More horses running. This time farther out. Travis cursed softly. "If those mustangs scatter into the ridge before sunrise, we will never recover them." Cole grabbed his reins. "We split up. Bring back every horse you can find before daylight." Riders mounted quickly and disappeared into the canyon dark carrying lantern light that flickered weakly against the massive stone walls. Within seconds the camp felt half empty. Cole swung onto his gray horse and looked toward Aiyana. "You stay close to camp." Her expression barely changed. "You still think I need protecting?" Cole exhaled once through his nose. "No," he admitted quietly. "I think I need someone who can track in the dark." For the first time since meeting him, the corner of Aiyana's mouth moved slightly. Not quite a smile. But close enough to change something between them. Together they rode north through narrow canyon trails where moonlight barely touched the ground. Hoofbeats echoed softly beneath towering cliffs while cold air carried the sharp smell of cedar and wet stone. After nearly half a mile, Aiyana suddenly raised one hand. Cole stopped instantly beside her. She pointed toward fresh tracks cutting across the canyon floor. Not Mustang tracks. Smaller. Controlled. "Rider came through here recently," she whispered. Cole studied the marks in the dirt. "How long ago?" Aiyana crouched beside the tracks, brushing loose sand aside carefully. Then her eyes narrowed. "Less than 15 minutes. Cole's hand tightened slightly on the reins. Somewhere deeper in the canyon, a horse whinnied once through the darkness. Then came another sound. Human voices. Low. Careful. Waiting. Aiyana slowly rose beside her mare, her face turning toward the shadows ahead. "Whoever followed us," she said quietly, "wanted us separated first." The canyon swallowed sound strangely at night. Voices bounced off stone walls and returned thinner, colder, almost ghost-like. Cole Mercer kept one hand near the reins while his gray horse moved carefully through the narrow trail ahead. Beside him, Aiyana rode in complete silence, her black mare stepping over loose rock without hesitation as if the animal could see through darkness itself. Somewhere farther ahead, another quiet voice drifted through the canyon wind. Then laughter. Low. Confident. Cole narrowed his eyes toward the shadows. "How many?" he whispered. Aiyana listened for several seconds before answering. "3 riders. Maybe 4. Cole glanced toward her. "You can tell that from voices?" "No," she said softly. "From the horses." Another sound rolled through the canyon then. Metal lightly striking leather. Saddle buckles shifting. The men ahead were moving slowly because they believed nobody could hear them. Cole slid quietly from his saddle beside a stretch of broken cliff wall. Aiyana followed without a word. Together they moved closer through cedar brush until flickering lantern light appeared beyond a narrow bend in the canyon. Four riders stood near a shallow wash surrounded by scattered mustangs. One rider held the loose herd while another examined the canyon trail behind them. Cole recognized the voice immediately. Wade Burnett. We should have driven more horses farther east, Wade muttered impatiently. Mercer will track these too easily. A cold weight settled into Cole's chest. Beside him, Aiyana remained perfectly still. Another rider shrugged near the lantern. You said the storm would scatter the whole herd. Wade kicked dust against the rocks. It would have if that Apache woman had not interfered. Cole's jaw tightened. He listened carefully now. Soon as Mercer loses enough horses, the deal falls apart. No partnership. No ranch expansion. He will have no choice except sell routes cheap. The third rider laughed quietly. And your cousin buys the land instead. Cole stared into the shadows beyond the lantern glow, disbelief mixing slowly with anger. Wade had ridden beside him for 3 years. Shared meals beside campfires. Worked his cattle drives through winter storms. Yet here he was risking the entire trail for money and pride. Aiyana leaned slightly closer. What will you do? She whispered. Cole did not answer immediately. Down below, Wade grabbed another mustang rope and mounted his horse. At sunrise, we drive the stolen herd through Black Hollow. Mercer will never catch us before the ridge closes. Black Hollow. Cole knew the place well. Narrow. Cliffs. Dangerous footing. A bad route for frightened horses even during daylight. Beside him, Aiyana slowly looked toward the eastern sky where faint silver moonlight touched the canyon edge. If they push the herd there before dawn, she said quietly, the horses will panic. Cole exhaled slowly. Then we stop them now. Before Aiyana could answer, loose rock suddenly shifted beneath Cole's boot. Small. Barely louder than gravel falling down a roof. But in the silence of the canyon, it sounded enormous. Every rider below froze instantly. Wade jerked toward the shadows, eyes narrowing. Someone is up there. Lantern light swung across the canyon wall. Horses stomped nervously. Cole reached for his reins, but Aiyana touched his arm once. Calm. Steady. Then she gave a low whistle into the darkness. Sharp and strange. Instantly, the scattered mustangs below lifted their heads all at once. Another whistle followed. The horses exploded into motion, surging through the wash in a rolling storm of dust and pounding hooves. Wade shouted as ropes slipped from nervous hands. Lantern light crashed into darkness. Confusion swallowed the canyon. Move, Aiyana whispered. Cole barely had time to mount before her black mare launched forward through the shadows. Together they rode hard through the twisting canyon while chaos echoed behind them. Wind tore against Cole's face as they raced across loose stone beneath the moonlight. Then, just before the trail curved west, Aiyana suddenly slowed her horse and looked back toward the distant lantern glow disappearing behind them. Wade was not the one leading this, she said quietly. Cole frowned. What do you mean? Her dark eyes narrowed toward the canyon behind them. Men like Wade follow money, she whispered. Which means somebody richer is waiting at the end of this trail. The ride back to camp felt longer than the journey out. Wind howled across the canyon ridges hard enough to shake loose dust from the cliffs above while moonlight painted the narrow trail in pale silver. Cole Mercer kept replaying Wade Burnett's words in his mind. Somebody richer is waiting at the end of this trail. Men betrayed each other for money every day across the territory. But this felt bigger than stolen horses. Planned. Patient. Dangerous in ways Cole had not fully seen until now. Ahead of him, Aiyana rode through the darkness with steady control, her black mare barely making sound against the rocky ground. She looked calm, but Cole noticed the way her eyes constantly searched the cliffs and shadows around them. She trusted silence less than most people trusted gunfire. When they finally reached camp, the remaining riders rushed toward them through the cold dawn air. Travis Reed stepped forward first. "We found some of the herd near the eastern wash," he said quickly. "But 6 horses are still gone." Cole nodded once and dismounted heavily from his saddle. The camp looked different now. Smaller somehow. Nervous. Men avoided eye contact while tightening straps or pretending to focus on coffee tins and supply bags. Trust had cracked open during the night, and once that happened on a trail drive, every sound became suspicious. Wade Burnett sat near the fire with a blanket around his shoulders pretending to look exhausted. Cole studied him carefully. If Wade felt fear, he hid it well. "You find anything?" Wade asked casually. Cole tossed his reins toward a stable hand. "Enough." The answer hung cold in the morning air. Aiyana moved quietly past the fires toward the horses, but before she could leave, an older rider named Franklin Pierce spoke up from beside the wagon. "This whole trail has gone wrong since she arrived." Several men glanced toward him uneasily. Franklin stood slowly, gray beard moving in the wind. "First the storm. Then stolen horses. Now riders in the canyon." His eyes settled hard on Aiyana. "Seems like trouble follows Apache signs these days." Nobody answered right away. Cole felt anger rise in his chest, but Aiyana remained perfectly still beside her mare. "You think I called the storm?" she asked softly. Franklin crossed his arms. "I think strange things happen when strangers ride into camp." Wade stayed quiet near the fire, watching carefully now. Cole stepped forward. "Enough." Franklin shook his head stubbornly. "Mercer, men are scared. They deserve answers." Aiyana slowly turned toward the riders gathered around the firelight. Wind pulled against the feathers braided into her dark hair while dawn spread pale gold across the cliffs above camp. "You want answers?" she asked quietly. Then she pulled back the sleeve of her buckskin jacket just enough to reveal an old scar running along her shoulder. White against bronze skin. Thin. Jagged. The entire camp fell silent. "My village once trusted men carrying government papers and promises," she said. 3 days later, we buried children beside the river. Even Franklin looked away after that. Aiyana lowered her sleeve calmly. "Fear can turn decent men cruel long before hunger ever does." Cole watched the riders carefully now. Nobody spoke. Nobody laughed. Somewhere behind camp, one of the mustangs gave a restless cry toward the ridge above them. Then Travis suddenly pointed toward the western cliffs. "Riders." Every head turned instantly. For dark figures appeared high along the ridge trail overlooking camp. Still. Watching. Too far away to identify clearly through the rising dust and morning light. Cole narrowed his eyes. "That is not Wade's group." Aiyana stepped beside him, studying the silhouettes carefully. Her expression changed for the first time since dawn. Not fear. Recognition. "No," she whispered. "It is worse." Cole glanced toward her sharply. "You know them?" The wind carried across the canyon before she finally answered. "The man in front wears silver on his saddle." Her voice dropped lower. Colder. "There is only one trader in Arizona territory rich enough to ride with silver in canyon country." Cole felt the weight in her words immediately. "Who?" Aiyana kept her eyes fixed on the distant riders above camp while the morning sun slowly climbed over Dead Man Ridge behind them. "Victor Calloway," she said quietly. "And wherever he rides, land stops belonging to the people living on it." The riders on the ridge remained motionless while morning light spread slowly across Dead Man Ridge. For dark silhouettes against pale stone. Watching. Waiting. Cole Mercer had spent enough years around dangerous men to recognize confidence when he saw it. Those riders were not hiding because they did not believe anyone below could stop them. Wind pushed through camp carrying the bitter smell of dust and distant rain while the mustangs shifted uneasily near the canyon wall. Even the horses sensed something wrong in the air. Beside Cole, Aiyana never took her eyes off the figures above them. Victor Calloway buys land after people lose the strength to defend it, she said quietly. He does not rush. He waits for hunger and fear to do the work for him. Cole looked toward Wade Burnett near the fire. Suddenly everything fit together too cleanly. Stolen horses. Broken trust. Riders pushing the herd toward dangerous canyon trails. Somebody had wanted this drive to fail before it ever reached the northern routes. Travis Reed stepped closer, lowering his voice. What do we do now? Cole watched the ridge silently for several seconds before answering. We finish the drive. Wade let out a sharp laugh from behind the fire. Finish it? He stood slowly, brushing dust from his coat. Half the herd is restless, men barely trust each other anymore, and now Calloway's riders are sitting over us like vultures. Cole turned toward him calmly. You knew they were following us. The camp froze again. Wade's face tightened, though only slightly. Careful, Mercer. No, Cole replied quietly. Careful is how we got here. Aiyana stepped forward before the argument could spread further. Calloway wants division, she said. Men fighting each other waste strength. Franklin Pierce studied her uneasily. And what if we already lost too much strength? Aiyana looked toward the frightened mustangs crowded near the canyon edge. Then toward the tired riders who had spent the night expecting betrayal from shadows all around them. Horses survive storms by moving together, she said softly. Only frightened animals run alone. Silence settled across camp after that. The strange thing was nobody argued with her this time. Not even Franklin. Somewhere high above, one of Calloway's riders slowly turned his horse and disappeared along the ridge line. The others followed without hurry. Watching long enough to remind everyone they were there. Cole exhaled slowly once the ridge stood empty again. Pack camp, he ordered. We ride within 10 minutes. Men moved quickly after that. Not because they felt safe, but because standing still suddenly felt worse. By midday, the trail narrowed into the final pass leading north out of Dead Man Ridge. Sunlight burned hot against the cliffs while loose gravel shifted beneath hundreds of hooves moving carefully through the canyon. Cole rode near the front beside Aiyana as the mustangs followed behind in restless waves of dust and motion. You were right about Wade, he said quietly. Aiyana adjusted the reins lightly in one hand. Men chasing money usually stop seeing people. Cole studied her for a moment. You still rode back to warn us anyway. A faint smile touched her face for barely a second. The horses deserved better owners. Cole laughed softly under his breath before realizing it was the first genuine laugh he had managed in days. Ahead, the canyon finally opened wide enough for sunlight to spill fully across the trail. Beyond the ridge waited Green Valley land and the northern routes that would save his ranch. Riders behind them began murmuring with relief as the herd safely crossed the final stretch of dangerous ground. Then Travis suddenly rode forward from the rear of the drive. Mercer, he called out with surprise in his voice. You need to see this. Cole turned in the saddle. Far behind the trailing herd, a single rider approached slowly through the drifting dust. Wade Burnett. Alone. No weapon drawn. No arrogance left in his face either. Only exhaustion. He stopped several